Have you ever felt like you're living a life designed by someone else? Like you're playing a role, following scripts that society, family, or even your friends have written for you? What if I told you that this role you're playing isn't really you, but rather a mask you've worn for so long that you've forgotten what's underneath? Today, we're going to explore one of the most important truths for anyone looking to break free from the matrix. You are not your ego. You're more than the story you've been told about yourself. And once you realize that, the chains that keep you bound to this mental matrix start to fall away. Let's think about why we get trapped in this matrix in the first place. Imagine a child. This child is born with no sense of self-awareness. At first, the child doesn't know it exists as an individual. Its first awareness is of the outside world, the mother, the sounds, the sights, the sensations. The child learns who it is through the reactions of others. If the child is praised, it feels important. If the child is ignored or criticized, it feels worthless. Slowly, through this feedback loop, the child starts to construct an identity based on what others think. This identity is called the ego. It's a mental construct, a reflection of outside opinions. It's not who you really are. Let's relate this to something practical. Think about social media. Every time you post a picture, share a thought, or respond to a comment, it's almost like you're seeking approval. When you get likes, you feel good. When you don't, you might feel less valued. This constant need for validation is exactly how the ego functions. It thrives on external recognition. But here's the catch. This version of yourself that you show to the world is not your true self. It's a mask, a reflection of how you want others to perceive you. And the more you identify with this mask, the more you forget your true essence. Now, take a minute to ask yourself, how often do you play a role in your daily life? At work, do you become the professional version of yourself, following rules and expectations just to fit in? With friends, are you the fun version of yourself, always trying to be liked? And in relationships, do you mold yourself into the person you think your partner wants you to be? Each one of these roles is a construct of the ego, but none of them are you. They're just versions of you that have been shaped by external expectations. The real question is, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when the mask comes off? Let's dive into a real-world example. Imagine you're at work and you've been working hard on a project. You're expecting recognition from your boss, but instead, they give credit to someone else. How do you feel? Probably frustrated, angry, or even hurt. But why? Your ego, which is built on the need for approval and recognition, feels threatened. It's as if someone is taking away a piece of your identity. But here's the truth. Your true self doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need approval. The part of you that feels upset is the ego, and the ego's survival depends on external validation. By observing this reaction, you can learn a lot about how the ego operates. The ego thrives on comparison, competition, and approval, but your true self, it doesn't need any of that. The more you observe these reactions, the more you can start to disidentify from them. Now let's take a moment to consider how society plays into this. From the moment we're born, society begins shaping us into what it needs us to be. It teaches us what's acceptable, what's valuable, and what's not. And it tells us how to behave, how to think, and what to believe. And if we don't fit into these molds, we're often rejected, criticized, or made to feel like we don't belong. Think about school, for example. If you excel, you're praised, given awards, and celebrated. If you struggle, you might be labeled as a failure, lazy, or incapable. This kind of conditioning trains us to seek validation from the outside world and reinforces the ego's need for approval. But here's the thing, society isn't interested in your true self. It's interested in making you fit into its system. It doesn't care if you're happy, fulfilled, or truly conscious. It cares if you're efficient and if you conform to the roles it has assigned to you. That's why the ego is so easily manipulated. Because it's built on external feedback. Take a pause here. Close your eyes for a moment and reflect. Who are you without the need for approval? Who are you without the labels society has given you? Imagine for a moment that no one is watching, no one is judging. In this space, what remains? This is the space where your true self resides. It's not attached to what others think. It doesn't need external validation to exist. It's free. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If the ego is so destructive, why don't we just let it go? Here's the tricky part. Letting go of the ego can feel terrifying. It's like stepping into the unknown. When you start to disidentify from the ego, it can feel like the ground beneath you is crumbling. You might feel lost, confused, or even scared. This is the chaos that comes before transformation. It's like being in the middle of a storm. Everything feels uncertain. But it's in this chaos that the ego starts to crumble and your true self begins to emerge. Let me share a quick story to illustrate this. There's a famous Zen story where a student asks a master, "What happens after the ego dies?" The master replies, "Nothing happens. The only thing that dies is the illusion." The chaos you feel is the breaking of that illusion. It's the matrix falling apart. So how do we begin to break free from the matrix and move beyond the ego? Here are a few practical steps you can start taking today. Observation. Start by simply observing your thoughts and reactions. The next time you feel anxious, angry, or frustrated, pause and ask yourself, is this my ego reacting? Most of the time, you'll find that it is. Disidentification. Once you observe your ego in action, practice not identifying with it. Recognize that these thoughts and emotions are not your true self. They are just the ego's way of maintaining control. Acceptance. Don't try to fight the ego. Fighting it only gives it more power. Instead, accept it for what it is, a construct. The more you accept it, the less power it has over you. Mindfulness. Stay present. The ego thrives on past regrets and future anxieties. But your true self exists only in the present moment. By practicing mindfulness, you can stay connected to your true self and keep the ego at bay. Breaking free from the ego is not an overnight process. It's a journey, one that requires patience, awareness, and courage. But the reward is immense. When you let go of the false self, the ego, you begin to experience life from a place of peace, clarity, and true freedom. You're no longer a prisoner of the matrix. You're free to live authentically, without the need for approval, validation, or recognition. You are enough, just as you are. If you found this reflection helpful, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue this journey of breaking free from the mental matrix together. Stay conscious, stay present, and remember, you are not your ego.